Welcome to the channel, guys. Today I'm going to be talking about none other than the infamous Club de Nuit Intense Man, so stay tuned for that. And if you like the content, hit that like and subscribe button. Really do appreciate it. First and foremost, I want to give a shout out to Sonny. He actually was kind enough, is from the Canadian Fragrance Facebook page. He was kind enough to actually just send me this EDT sample so I could try it out. And he also sent me the Milestone, which is a clone or inspiration of Millésime Imperial. I will be trying this one out, and I will be doing a comparison with the original Creed. But I've wanted to try this one for a long time. It's one that's talked about a lot. It gets a lot of hate. It gets a lot of love. And of course, for that reason, it's one that I couldn't stay away from, even though I'm not the hugest Aventus fan. I still wanted to try this one out and see what it's all about. So I do want to thank him. Sent me these decants just out of the kindness of his heart. Really do appreciate that. But without further ado, let's get into this. Now, one of the first things that I've heard a lot of people talk about with this fragrance, very harsh lemon pledge kind of opening. I was very surprised that that is not the case. Now, this is a newer batch from what I understand, and I think there has been some changes, and that from people I was talking to, Sonny included, older bottles were definitely harsher on the opening. And there is a little bit of abrasiveness with this one. It is a little bit harsh. But it doesn't come off as lemon pledge, and I will say I did ask other people after spraying this right away, asked them what it smells like, and nobody said lemon pledge. And then I of course asked them if it smelled like lemon pledge. They all said no. So essentially I think there's maybe some people have a scent association, so there is very strong lemon in this opening. I get virtually no pineapple, and for the first minute or so it's very, very lemony. It's very fresh, and it is very lemony. Now, the lemon actually comes off a little bit like lemonade. So I've been drinking this lemon Mio water, I think it is, flavored water. It does kind of remind me of that. There's kind of like a almost candied lemon kind of a vibe. But it definitely, in the opening, it does not have that Aventus touch, especially right there in that first minute, because it's very, very lemony. Now, as it starts to tone down within the first couple of minutes, I get a little bit more of the bergamot, and it starts to give me that Aventus feel. It definitely has something that's going to remind you of Aventus. Now, it doesn't, for me, on skin, have much pineapple. I did also test this one on paper, and I did find I got a little bit of pineapple on the paper, but on skin, I absolutely got none. There is still that fruitiness that really comes across like Aventus in the opening. But it's not a pineapple-heavy version, in my opinion, and at least for me on my skin. So if you really love the pineapple, this probably isn't it for you, but it does have actually a not unpleasant lemon opening that shifts into a little bit more bergamot-centric and has a nice fruity Aventus kind of an opening. Now, what I do get with this one, especially in the dry down, is more muskiness and more woodiness. Now, Aventus, of course, is well known for the birch. So this is not smoky like the older Aventuses. It does have, to me, a little bit more musk than the Aventuses that I've tried. So it is kind of balanced between musk and birch, in my opinion, which is nice. I really like the birch. It was one of my favorite features of Aventus. And so this one, to me, if you're really looking for that birch feel, like you're standing right beside a birch tree, this is not quite that. It does have a little bit of an impression of it, but I still think, with respect to that birch note, the best clone that I've ever smelt is Emperor EDP. Now, of course, there's a big price difference between those two. So Emperor EDP, I don't know, I think it's around $100, and this is like $20. So there's a big price difference. But for people that are the big birch fans, I think that's probably a better choice. Now, it does smell pleasant, and I would say in the dry down, this one really smells a lot like Aventus. It's quite fresh. It has that fruity kind of an opening, minus the pineapple, so that signature pineapple. Although I should say, at least in a batch of Aventus that I've had, I also didn't really get much pineapple. So I had 18DO2, and I got that sort of bergamonty fruity opening, which is similar to this, although more lemon heavy. But not much of the pineapple. So to me anyways, at least in all the times I've smelled Aventus, pineapple is not always really, really prominent, at least on my skin. There is that fruitiness and that bergamot and that sort of juicy opening, which I think this does okay job at facsimile or making a clone of. It is definitely different on the opening. Dry down on the other hand, you get basically a balanced musky birch kind of a feel, which definitely feels like Aventus. And I think, you know, if somebody were to smell this in the air, this is not... I think a lot of people would think this smells like Aventus. I don't think a lot of people would smell this in the air and say to themselves, you know, oh, you're wearing a clone or whatever, you're trying to rip off Aventus. I don't think most people could finally tell that difference. Maybe somebody who wears it all the time. But to me, it's very subtle, and with all the different batch variations, I think that a lot of people would just simply think it's a different batch, if at all they questioned it. So I would say that, you know, ultimately this is one that gets a lot of hate. It gets a lot of hate, obviously, because... And to me, if you don't like clones, that's one thing. Fine. Some people don't agree with clones. I personally don't have a problem with them. And so if you have a problem with clones, fine. You'll have a problem with this fragrance. But ultimately, I think this gets a lot of hate because it does do a pretty good job of doing what Aventus does, and it does it for like $20. Whereas a bottle of Aventus, I mean, if you buy it on the gray market, yes, you can get it for a more reasonable price, $240 US, versus this, though, which is $20. And then you have, of course, retail, which is like $500 or something. Now, I will say it's not exactly Aventus. I mean, if you really sit there and dissect it, it's a little bit off. And if you really want Aventus, you have to get Aventus, of course. That's always sort of the thing to know, is if what you're really looking for is 100% Aventus, you know, you're going to have to get Aventus. But for the price point, I think this is a very good clone. It's a very good inspiration. Now, I have tried something else in this price point. I think it was called Levant by Joe Milano. And well, I think that from the opening was a lot more similar to Aventus. The dry down was much less so. So it was more musky, not really any birch. Whereas this one, you at least have a balance of that musk and that birch. And I think ultimately in that price point, in that $20 range, that Club Nuit Intense Man is in fact the best clone there is in the price bracket for sure. Now, I thought it was kind of funny because Jeremy's been talking about this one a lot recently. I don't know if he is upset with Creed selling their brand, what the deal is, because he's also not a fan of clones very much. So it's strange that he is suddenly talking about it, but he is. And I think ultimately this is one of these cases where I totally agree with him, that if you want Aventus on a budget, this is going to do the job. It's going to be a little bit harsher in the opening. You're going to get a little bit more lemon. You're not really going to get that pineapple. In the dry down, it's going to be vastly or pretty much the same as Aventus. You get a musky birch, little bit of that fruitiness lingers on, but it is very easy to wear. It's very inoffensive for anybody who is partial to Aventus. And ultimately, I would definitely recommend it for people who are looking for an alternative to Aventus. So I did also pick up the EDP, and I will have to do a comparison of the two to see which one's better and which one's got better performance. But actually on that topic, the performance of this is not stellar. So I'd heard it's kind of nuclear, but I've also heard people talk about, you know, the reformulation and it not performing as well. I would say this one lasts about 6 hours on my skin, which is not exceptional. But again, for a $20 fragrance, I am absolutely not complaining in that 6 hour range. That's actually quite good. And I've had batches of Aventus that honestly, you know, it lasts about 6 hours. So it's not nuclear, but it does last a good long time. Projection is actually not bad, and it has pretty good sillage. So it can fill a small room. I don't think it's going to fill a huge room, but it definitely can fill a smaller room. And, you know, it has a nice sillage as you walk by. It lingers in the air for a little while. So it is something that is definitely there. And I've actually had people comment on this, saying that they could smell it even after I had left the room, and then they walked in the room, they could smell it. So it is something that lingers, and it is something that is going to perform in definitely a very good way for the type of fragrance that it is and for the price value proposition. So price value proposition, exceptional on Club de Nuit Intense Man. I know a lot of people are going to hate to hear that, but honestly, I'm not a big fan of Aventus, and I will be completely honest with you. I think this is actually solid for what you're paying for. I would have to recommend this as something, if you want a cheap alternative to Creed, that you should check this one out. Just again, be aware that lemon opening is there. It's not as harsh as I'd heard, but it is going to be a little bit different, and it is a little bit edgy, a little bit harsh. Anyways, guys, I'm going to leave that one there. Have you tried Club de Nuit Intense Man, or do you have another Creed clone, an Aventus clone that you love, that you go to instead of Aventus? Let me know. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.